So today's a good day. I got a package in the mail. I'm really excited. It's got all of the parts in it so I can put the main portion of the 13B rotary together. So you'll notice in here I've got my side seals, my corner seals, I've got my bearings, my rotor bearings and my stationary gear bearings, all of my oil seal springs and all of the seals. So I have everything ready to go now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. So the next thing I've got to do is press the bearings out of my stationary gears so that I can press the new bearing in. To do that, when I ordered the bearings for the rotor and for the stationary gear from Atkins Rotary, I also ordered this installation tool. So this slides in and then you can press the bearing out and then you can use it to press the new one in. I also got one for the rotor bearing. Admitted, those two tools were more than the bearings, but they are definitely necessary to accomplish this project. So we're going to head on out to the press. So here we are out at the press. I'm going to go ahead and press these bearings out. So in order to do that, I need to set up the press in such a manner that there's a hole here so they can be pressed out the bottom and without binding and catching. We also have to pay attention to this little stud because we do not want to press and mess up the alignment pin right there. So now I've got it set up so that alignment pin is here in the V, so it's not getting hit. And it looks like we're going to have to lower the shelf on the press. We'll go ahead and get that done. Then I can put my stationary gear back in there. This is the press out tool. You want to make sure you're pressing it the right direction and not pressing through the key. You want to come out the other direction. We'll go ahead and set that there. I actually think that I'm going to grab a spacer. So now I've got a spacer. I usually use a deep well impact socket. I can get them in different diameters so they work well. And we'll just go ahead and press this one out. Once you get it moving, it goes pretty good. And there we go. One bearing out. So we'll go ahead and do the other one. So now we're going to get ready to press in the new bearings. You'll notice on the bearing here, we have two things. We have the opening for the oil port, and we have the keyway that makes sure the bearing is in straight and that it doesn't spin, it's in the right location. So you could just eyeball as you press those down in, but rather than do that, it's a little smarter option to take your square and actually just make a mark from the keyway all the way down the bearing. And then you can do it again on the other side like this. Then when you go to press that bearing in, it's easier to line these lines up with the keyway, because once it starts to press in, it will no longer be possible to rotate the bearing into the desired location. So now that it's marked, we'll hit the press again. So now we're back out at the press, and I can go ahead and take the bearing that I marked in there. And it's important to remember, you don't want to touch or do anything with the inside of the bearing as much as possible, especially have metal or abrasive things in there that could cause scarring. But now I can put this bearing in the hole, and hopefully you can see that, but I'm lining up. I'll go ahead and pull this out of here for a minute. So I'm lining up my marks from the magic marker with that keyway right there. That way it makes sure that when it presses in, the keyway is in the right spot and the oil port is in the right spot. So it's also very important to make sure that you don't start a little bit sideways or crooked, because it can damage your bearing. So you want to make sure that you have everything is lined up completely straight, and be really slow and easy until you get it going to make sure that everything's lined up. So I have it all lined up. Now I'm just going to come down real slow and easy and make sure that it starts in there completely straight. And once it's lined up nice and straight, you can just press it right down in, and then you'll just want to make sure that you don't over press it. You don't want to go in too far. The edge of that bearing should be totally flush with the housing. So as we get down near the end, and to keep from going in too far, I'm going to go ahead and take it off, take my tool out, just kind of feel and make sure that it's flush, which is exactly what we have here. And so that bearing is in and ready to go. So we'll get the next one. So now we're going to go ahead and change the bearings in the rotor. So you'll notice on the rotor the same keyway similar to that on the stationary gear. So we're going to put that keyway down in the down position like this when we go to press it out. And then we'll want to make sure that we have a big enough gap in there that the bearing can travel out without hitting our bracing. Then we'll just go ahead and center that up on the ram. And I have a tool also that I bought for these that we'll go ahead and use to pull these out. And once again, it's important to remember that I put that keyway down. That way we're pressing out and not dragging that keyway all the way through the rotor. Then we can just start pressing it. There we go. Once it starts moving, it goes pretty good. So they can be locked in there pretty dang tight. You want to make sure you catch it because your tool will also fall down through. And it's made out of brass, and we don't want any nicks or bangs on our tool. It's pretty heavy, so we'll want to make sure that we catch it. And there we go. There's the rotor bearing out. So we'll go ahead and do the other one. So now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the rotor bearings that we did on the stationary gear bearings. and that is we're going to square across again and mark our keyways so that when we put it in, we can make sure that it is also lined up. So there you'll see the keyway and the center line of the keyway, and then we can go ahead and put that in the center line, the keyway notch on the rotor, so we're sure it presses in straight. All right, so here we are back out at the press. I'm setting this up on the press with the key notch up and towards me so I can see and match that up. And we can set the rotor in there. Take the brass tool. We want to have the keyway up. Put the brass tool in the bearing like that. Lower it in. Actually going to bring this one out here. It's a little harder to see to make sure it's lined up. All right. That's where it goes. The gear portion is a little more in the way on this one than it was on the other, so it's really narrow area to see. Now that we've got it lined up, bringing the press down, now the bigger around the circle, the more careful you want to be that you're starting out straight. Just keep a really good eye on it and make sure that the whole thing is going down and not just a portion of it. Otherwise, you'll ruin the bearing and you'll be doing this process again. Another thing we have to do on this one is, you'll notice now it's going down below the gear portion of the rotor, which is going to make it very difficult to see the depth that we're seating it. And so we're actually going to have to stop in the middle and make sure that we don't press it in too far. I don't know if you can see that. It's real hard to see down in around that gear. So you have to be careful. Try 3 or 4 times pulling it out to make sure that you're not pressing it in too far. So we'll go ahead and finish that. So now you'll see that we have that one pressed in flush right here. And on the rotors you can turn around, it's also flush right there. That's how you know that it's in the right way. So there's one done. I'll do the other one. There's the 2 stationary gears. The bearings pressed in them, all ready to go. Here's the 2 rotors with brand new bearings. Now we're on to the next step, which will be fitting all of the side seals, getting the rotors ready to go in. So we'll get headed on that now that I've got this step completed. So I hope that information was informative and helpful. I know this is only the second rotary I've ever built. The first one I did not replace the bearings. This is my first experience with that. Talked to several people, watched a bunch of informational videos, did some reading. Hopefully that's beneficial to you guys. There is one thing I didn't mention that I'd like to mention, and that is when I press them in, where it contacted the rotor and the stationary gear, it peeled off some metal from the press-in factor. Just make sure you clean that all up and make sure there's no metal fragments in your parts. You would hate to put it together and have that cause some issues. So hopefully this is informative. We're moving on to the next step, which is the side seals. I'd like to invite all of you to follow along with my project by subscribing to my YouTube channel. And also, I'm open to any suggestions or ideas or thoughts you might have about a 13B rotary aircraft engine at this time. Later on, we'll move to the next phase and we'll look for input there. But for now, we're looking at the engine, the intake system, the exhaust system, the turbo system, stuff like that. Anyway, till next time, talk to you soon.